that historical part, we are going to look at what we may call contemporary Islamic economics. And this contemporary Islamic economics comes at a time when the Muslim world is no longer leading in let's say, knowledge and in all the disciplines, right? So what we have in Muslim countries is a situation where we are basically teaching economics that is being taught all over the world. And this economics has come from the last 300 years of Western European experience. Right? So when we talk about Islamic economics, we are in a way trying to, on the one hand, we are trying to relate to the economics that we are teaching today, which is the modern economics, what we call neoclassical economics. At the same time, when we are trying to develop Islamic economics, we also want to go back to our historical heritage, our legacy, and try to develop an Islamic economics that is, is seen to be part of our contemporary disciplines that we have. So this is the economics that we are going to be focusing on, right? Then we briefly started talking about why Islamic economics, right? And if you remember, the central feature of why Islamic economics, nothing we do, nothing we teach in universities is value free, right? And therefore, the economics that we are teaching, the one that I said is coming from conventional Western European experience, although it claims to be positive economics, that means dealing only with facts. Yeah, this is what is there in every textbook when you read economics. The first chapter will tell you we are not dealing with normative issues. We are not dealing with values. We are dealing with positive economics, right? And that is why the early books that used to come out, in maybe in the 50s and 60s, there was a very famous book, Robert Lipsey. And that book was called Introduction to Positive Economics, right? Over the years, they dropped the word positive. They just say Introduction to Economics. But actually, they are talking about this positive economics, right? The one that they claim is value-free. So our assumption, very big assumption that we make in this course is that there is no such thing as value-free economics, especially social science, especially a discipline that deals with human interaction. There cannot be value-free social science or human science because the subject matter is man. So, so we said that this is the reason why we talk about the need to have an alternative economics, because the value system that is being promoted in modern economics is not value free. So we need to investigate what the values of the system are, and we make some changes. We may need to reject, we may need to modify, and in some cases we may accept. But that process is, maybe we will discuss when we go to the third part, which is how we develop Islamic economics. So no discipline is value free. And the second point, in order to show these values, we say that every discipline that we teach, it comes from a foundational base. We call that foundational base, for purpose of this course, worldview, right? Worldview. Different scholars have used different terms. Some scholars like Schumpeter, I think we introduced him last week, he used the term vision. Every economics is based on a vision, right? Any analysis that we do in economics, whether it is analysis which is using mathematics or graphs or any other type of quantitative methods, they have to be preceded by a vision, according to Schumpeter. Right? So So don't think that if you are a quantitative person and you are writing economics very quantitatively, don't think that it is value free just because you are having numbers and equations. I think behind the numbers, you have a vision, you have a worldview, right? And sometimes this worldview can become an ideology. Yeah? So there is a difference between worldview and ideology. I mean, I would recommend for those of you who are interested, just go and Google out what is ideology, what is worldview. Generally speaking, worldview is used when we talk about sciences, when we talk about academic development. Ideology is used in a more broader context, and sometimes we talk about ideologies in a very general way. So there are so many ideologies. Some people will even argue and say that underlying capitalism is also an ideology. Many things that have ism to it are ideologies, right? So there is a difference between the use of the word ideology and the word worldview. So we are focusing on worldview, right? So what is our purpose of, or what is our way we are going to talk about why Islamic economics? We're going to look at the worldview that you find in Islamic economics, yeah, the worldview at the base of Islamic economics, and we are going to compare it with the worldview at the base of modern economics. So based on our approach, if we are able to show that the worldview of Islamic economics is not the same as the worldview in modern economics, then Islamic economics is a valid area to study. It is a valid alternative because the worldviews differ. The foundation differs, right? So we ended last week by saying that what we're going to do now is look at these worldviews, right? Now, when we want to talk about worldview, I think we ended the last class by some definitions of worldviews, right? Worldviews are, I mean, there are so many scholars who have talked about worldview. Um, from Islamic point of view, of course, very famous will be the work of Professor Atas. Um, but when you look, if you just Google the term worldview and you get some academic articles written, worldview is basically a kind of cluster of beliefs that people have that talk about the big picture. I think I mentioned it last week, the big picture. Economics is one aspect of the big picture. So when you want to talk about economics and when you want to solve your problems in economic field, it cannot be separated from the worldview. It cannot be separated from the way you look at the universe, the way you look at human beings, right? Your view on religion. Yeah, all of this is very important. And therefore, when you try to discuss economics, while it can be specific to economic problems, but you cannot separate it from the bigger picture, right? So worldview is that big picture. And we also mentioned worldview is not just how you look at the world, but it is also going to impact the way you make decisions, right? Why you do something has one reason is because of your worldview. If your worldview says that this is not something you should do, chances are you won't do it. Okay. And if your worldview says this is what you need to do, then chances are you will do it. Right. So the worldview is a kind of a immaterial foundation of how you live your life. Right. And maybe just a little bit I want to add on this. Worldview is something which is very natural. Every one of us has a worldview, but sometimes we don't know that worldview. Yeah, so Professor Al-Parsalan, who used to be our professor in ISTAC and who's now back in Turkey, he used the term natural worldview. So when we are younger, when we are growing up, there are many things that we do. Sometimes we don't know why we do it. We just do it, right? So it is a natural worldview at that point in time. Many things that we do, we just do it because our parents do it, our brothers and sisters do it, our community does it, we also do it. So it's a kind of a natural thing that everybody has. But we may not understand this worldview. But later on, as we get older, and especially as we are now doing in university, when we want to study economics, or when we want to study psychology, when we want to study sociology, when we start studying disciplines, because disciplines are basically a more formal way of understanding why you do things. So I go and buy things in the shop. I go and I make my decisions, my choices. When something price goes up, maybe I don't buy as much. This is my normal economic activity. But now we are trying to understand why we do things. So this is where disciplines come in. Economics is about a more detailed understanding of our economic behavior. So when we want to understand this, we start talking about the foundations. And as we are going to do now, we are going to discuss the worldview at the base of Islamic economics. When we do this, when we start to understand the worldview, that natural worldview now becomes something more, what it is a manifested worldview. It becomes something that we elaborate formally. So now you know this is the view of man, this is the view of nature, this is the view of consumption. This is making the the natural worldview what Professor Parsalan calls transparent worldview. All right, so this is the process of what we are doing actually now, without going into the detail of that. Yeah? Okay, so let's come back to discussion of worldview. When we want to talk about worldview, there can be so many important concepts that can be analyzed and discussed under worldview. And I believe you are having a course, for some of you who are taking the course, on Islamic worldview now, right? So you have a course maybe over the weekend or something. This course maybe will talk about all those other big areas of worldview, about prophethood, about the messenger, about you know, in detail about God, about Allah. This will be discussed in that course. What I want to do in this first part of this course, I want to look at certain elements in the worldview and connect it to economics. Because remember, what we are trying to do here is we want to look at the foundations of Islamic economics. So what is that worldview that is at the base of Islamic economics? And we want to compare it with the worldview at the base of modern economics. So we don't want to look at all concepts which we can discuss under worldview. We want to look at those few concepts that are very relevant for economics. All right. So what we're going to do in this very brief few minutes that we have left today, as well as maybe a little bit of next week, we are going to look at just a few components of worldview. We will look at man, right? Focus of man. We will talk about nature or the universe, because what is economics? Economics is all about how human beings interact with other human beings and with nature, with our resources, in order to produce and to consume. So man is very important. Resources, or in this case, we are talking about nature or the universe, is very important. And then for what purpose? What is the goal? What is the aim that we do economics? We're going to cover these three components to try and show you that the worldview is different between Islamic economics and modern neoclassical economics, right? Now, just before we go into looking at the element of man in worldview, let me just spend a little bit of time on religion, because I think this is very important. I know you already will do this for sure in your Islamic worldview course that you take. But Why is it important for us to talk about religion? Because we call it Islamic economics. We are putting Islam in front of economics, right? We are putting the name of a religion in front of economics. So there is a religious-based economics that we want to talk about. So can we talk about Christian economics? Can we talk about Jewish economics? Can we talk about Hindu economics, Buddhist economics? There are people who write on these topics. So you can read writings written by scholars who want to promote Buddhist economics. So if you remember this very important book, Small is Beautiful, yeah, written by Schumacher. This was a book that was promoting, or it was based on Buddhist teachings, right? There are also quite a number of people who are talking about Gandhian economics, yeah, after Mahatma Gandhi. This will be economics that is based on the teachings of Hinduism as they understand it. And you will also have Christian economics, people talking about it. Right? So you can find scholars who are talking about other religions and how they develop economics. So what we're going to do, we want to talk about Islamic economics, right? So what is this religion? Now, please, you read on your own. I'm sure it is in that article that I have suggested for your reading. The concept of religion is very, in English, is very different than the concept of deen, right? The concept of deen that we use in Islam to represent religion. Yeah? Lakum dinukum waliyadin. To you, your religion, to me, mine. So that word deen, scholars unanimously say that that concept of deen is not the same meaning as you will have in, let's say, the use of the word religion in English. All right, it means very different things. Montgomery Watt, and I'm quoting Montgomery Watt, I'm not quoting any of our Muslim scholars, because I want to make comparison between what modern Westerners think about religion in general and compare it to what deen is. So I'm using the work of Montgomery Watt, a famous scholar from Edinburgh in the UK, who wrote a book in 1979. The title of the book is What is Islam? Okay, so in that book, he defines religion and he defines deen. And what does he say about deen? Deen is a complete way of life. It covers all aspects of life, including private matters, including public matters, including things which in the West would be considered to be even etiquette. Yeah? Etiquette, how to eat, how to drink, how to sleep. All of this, according to Montgomery Watt, is part and parcel of the understanding Muslims have with regard to the concept of deen. Right? And for those of you who are interested, please read numerous works written on the concept of deen. Right? Now, religion, according to Montgomery Watt, at least to the modern Westerner, it may not be the case for the Westerner in the Middle Ages, but in today's modern Europe, and he's mainly talking about Europe, but it may also apply to other parts of Europe and even in America. The term religion means spending those few minutes or hours in church on Sunday, doing the rituals that they do in order to give some kind of peace to the soul. It also enables you to have certain good ethics, right? But it's only related to, let's say, going to church on Sunday. Deen, on the other hand, is a complete way of life. So you see in that comparison, or the comparative view of religion and deen that was put forward by a Western scholar, Montgomery Watt, that in the West, when they talk about the religion, it has been separated from other aspects of life. And this is a very important part of understanding why we need an Islamic economics, because in the West, and I think we talked about it a little bit in the last class, so I won't discuss it again, it went through that process of secularization. Okay, so to a Westerner today, to talk about religious-based economics is not economics. Yeah, because to them, religion means these rituals. But when you want to talk about Islamic economics, you cannot talk about economics without it being based on religion. And in our case, in the case of Islam, since our concept of deen is a complete way of life, it also includes economics, right? So for Muslims, Islamic economics is the only economics that you can have, all right? There cannot be an economics that is not connected to the deen, because the deen is a complete way of life, right? So that's maybe all I want to say about the concept of religion. We are talking about a very different concept. This is also very important when we are discussing, and sometimes we are debating with people from other religion. And if we are talking in English, like we are doing now, like I'm doing now, and we use the word religion, please keep in mind that from Islamic point of view, you actually mean deen. You don't mean religion as understood in the English language by modern Westerners, because that's a different meaning than deen. So if you are talking in English and somebody says, what is your religion? And you say Islam, and they say their religion is Hinduism or Christianity, please keep in mind the two religions are not the same, because your understanding of religion is deen. Their understanding of religion may be religion, right? So you first have to make sure what is their meaning of religion first. Having said that, there are also today many people, I have seen stickers at the back of the car. They put the sticker, Hinduism is a way of life. Okay, so they are also talking about way of life, but you must be clear, what do they mean by religion? Okay, now let's go to man. Now, because of that process of secularization that has gone in the West, you have today an economics that is no longer connected to religion. And so the modern economics that we teach, and the three components of secularization, the disenchantment of nature. You look at nature, you look at the universe, you only see object. Yeah? There is no more spiritual meaning to nature. You just see, for example, if you look at the forest, you only see the trees, you only see timber, bala. Yeah? So you can basically cut the trees to make money. But the spiritual meaning of nature is created for man. It's no longer there, because disenchantment of nature, according to Harvey Cox and according to Professor Latas, this is what one of the components of secularization is, disenchantment of nature. Then you have desacralization of politics. Politics here is meant to be authority. So authority now is no longer sacred. You no longer refer to God or to Allah as your source of authority. And if we modify it a little bit, we no longer refer to the revelation as a source of authority. Okay? The authority is no longer with God, it is now with human beings. Desacralization of politics. And the third component of secularization, the deconsecration of values. All values become relative. Something which is considered to be very important 100 years ago, today, not important at all. Okay? Who decides what is important, what is not important? Man. I decide. Okay? So with that three components of secularization, we look at man. Who is this central, economic agent that we are talking about? In Islam, when we talk about man, you can talk about the nature of man. Man is both physical but also spiritual, right? Allah created man from the clay, turab. At the same time, we have element of ruh, which is blown into our soul by Allah. So we have a bodily nature, material nature. At the same time, we have a spiritual nature. And it is that spiritual nature that is the true essence of man. Yeah? Man is in essence that ruh, or that spiritual being. But we are given the bodily, the body as the vehicle for us to carry out our duties in this world. So we have physical and spiritual being. Now, what is that got to do with economics? It tells you, for example, when I want to spend my income, I must satisfy not only my physical needs, but I must also satisfy my spiritual needs. Okay, so immediately this idea of man as having both material and spiritual dimension, the impact on economic decision making is I must produce not only material goods, but I must also produce spiritual goods. I have to consume not only for my material well-being, but I have to consume also for my spiritual well-being, right? So this means the nature of man itself has impact on how I'm going to conduct my economic activity. Okay, that's the nature of man, and we can discuss much more detail. Maybe the other more important part for our discussion is what is the role of man? All right. So if you look into the Quran, if you look into Hadith, if you look into the writings of scholars, they will tell you that man is, on one hand, Abdullah. Yeah? And Abd here, sometimes people translate it as servant, but the literal meaning is slave. We are the slave of Allah. Yeah? Abdullah. And secondly, we are Khalifa fil ard. We are the vicegerent on earth. Both these two roles must go together. All right. Professor Said Hossein Nasser has a very wonderful saying in one of his writings. The most dangerous creature in the world is a Khalifa who has forgotten he is Abd. It is a wonderful statement. A Khalifa who forgets he is Abd. This is the most, right? Why? Because what it means. Abd means slave. You are slave of Allah. You just follow what Allah has, Allah the Creator. You are following what all other creations are doing. Abdullah. Khalifa means, among others, you are given some kind of leadership role. You are given some kind of power over other creations. All right? But don't forget, you cannot be Khalifa without accepting you are Abdul. Yeah? So what has happened in the West, when they took away the authority of God, of Allah, and transfer it to man, the desacralization of politics, man or the servant. Yeah? Man is the master. And this creature is very dangerous. Yeah? Very dangerous. All right? So, the, the nature of man and driver. Okay. In Islamic economics, yes, we have akal, but we have the authority of Allah given in the Quran, and of course in the person of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Yeah, so we have a certain way of looking at man. Now this man is very different than the man that you have in modern economics. Yeah? This man in modern economics is a man that relies totally on the use of akal and the use of observation in order to make decisions. All right. Religion is no longer the guidebook. Science becomes the guidebook. Yeah? Everything is decided by science. And when we talk about science in secular Western disciplines, science is basically limited to the use of reason and observation. Yeah? There is no place for revelation. We will talk about this a little bit in our how we develop Islamic. So that is as far as man is concerned. What about nature? All right, and it's about 9:35 now, so I need to wrap up in a few minutes. What about nature? We mentioned just now, as far as the secularization process is concerned, nature has become purely object. So in modern economics, in the writings, when we read the writings of our classical economic scholars like John Stuart Mill and others who were writing in the 18th century, they always talk about exploiting resources. They use the word exploit, but they mean utilize. But they use the word exploit. Today, when we use exploit, it gives a negative connotation. So we say utilization or we use the resources, right? But man is the master. Yeah? Man decides. But in the case of Islamic economics, what is nature? What is the universe? What are the resources? We know very clearly that these are creations of Allah given to us as Khalifa, right? Man is given the role of being the trustee. Another understanding of Khalifa is that he or she performs the function of a trustee. Yeah? You are deputy, you are vicegerent. Who are you? When you are deputy, you are not the boss. You are answerable to the boss, right? So Khalifa means, in one sense, you are deputy. Therefore, you are not the master. You are the Khalifa. So in Islam, when we look at the way we look at nature, we see nature as sign of Allah's existence. In our terminology, we would say ayatullah. Yeah? So if you go to Iran, you have Ayatollah Khomeini, yeah, who was instrumental in the revolution of 1979. Ayatullah, sign of Allah. So when we look at nature, when we look at the forest, when we look at the beauty of nature, it is to be understood as a sign of Allah's creation. And therefore, we have certain duties and obligation towards nature. Right? We have to follow certain rules. Now, the last point, what is the aim in life? Now, in modern economics, of course, we don't talk about aim in life. We talk about what is the goal of the consumer, what is the goal of the producer, right? We are referring to specific function of economic man. But like I said, you cannot talk about your function in economics without connecting it to the bigger picture. So when we talk about aim in life in Islam, there are numerous verses in Quran. We are talking about achieving the pleasure of Allah, mardatillah. Yeah, this is the goal. We want to achieve falah, ultimate success. Success not only in this world, but success in the hereafter. So our goal in life cannot be limited to only maximizing our profit in this world. We must be able to make sure that our benefit is not only success in this world, but it must ultimately give you success in the hereafter. Right? So in modern economics, cost benefit is what we do. Your aim as a consumer, your aim as a producer, you're supposed to do cost benefit analysis, and you are supposed to choose the option in which your benefit is the biggest compared to your cost, right? Maximize your profit. Benefit minus cost, profit. But in Islamic economics, Do we want benefit? Do we want profit? Of course. The only difference is the profit cannot only be the profit in this world. It is irrational for, if I can use the term, Islamic man to choose an option that will give him profit in this world but loss in the hereafter. Yeah? In the Quran, you have verses saying, don't sell your religion for a very cheap price. What is that cheap price? Profit in this world. But you sell your religion for that. And that will make you a loser in the hereafter. So in aim in life or aim in economics, you must make sure that whatever decision you make as economic man, as Islamic economic man, or as Islamic man, your decision must be a decision that gives you profit in this world, but also profit and success in the hereafter. So in that sense, all your decisions in economics must be with reference also to the hereafter, right? So when we talk about decision making in Islamic economics, it is decision making that considers what the Mondar Kahaf has called extended time horizon. All our decision must be based on our position in the hereafter. So how do you know what is a good decision to make for economics? That's where you need the guidance of the Sharia. And the Sharia will guide you to make the good decision. All right, I think I should stop here because it is already 9:40. So maybe we have about 15-20 minutes for some questions, and I will also try to maybe respond to some of the questions that were asked in the session last week. Although, like I said, there are too many questions, and I don't know whether I can answer all of them today. What I will try to do, which maybe I should have done already, is to try and answer them. Maybe with something in the document that is given to me, and then maybe I send it back to Shahran, and he may try to distribute to others. But yes, I'm now open for anybody who would like to maybe ask questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think we don't realize that already almost 40 minutes you are talking. So succinct, so important about the topic. I remember we spoke with our friend from Japan, Brother Ahmad Shiozaki. He said when we talk about religion for Japanese, nothing to do with Tawheed. It's like something like mysticism or something like that. We always thought religion is Tawheed, but people don't understand like that. Like you say, when we talk about Christian or Buddhism, their religion is different. Ours is different meaning. So Alhamdulillah, you have highlighted a very important point. I have not seen any hand here. Maybe probably you can choose from the last week question while we are waiting for some hand.
Yeah, let me go to this question. There are some questions about the concept of riba. In the FIE course, when we teach it in the university, we will have one topic on riba and so on, but maybe not in this course. But just to answer the question, I prefer to use, and this is coming from Ahmad Noor and also from Razina, who talks about the issue of riba. Razina is from our IDF. See, when we use the term riba that we find in the Quran, when it is translated into English, sometimes the meaning can get lost. Yeah? So if any of you, when you read, say, Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation of Quran, he will use the word usury, right? And usury means exploitative interest rates. Exploitative interest rates. But usury sometimes can be interpreted to mean if it is a fair interest rate, it's okay. Right? And that is why there are some minority of scholars, because they are following this translation of using riba as usury, To them, they say banking interest is okay because banking interest is the cost of capital. This is the standard argument, in modern Western economics. But I prefer that when we use this word, why don't we just use riba? Allah has prohibited riba. We don't have to say Allah prohibited usury. He prohibited riba. Now, what is riba? We need to know the characteristics of riba, etc. And one of the important definitions or the way scholars have understood riba to say that the interest rate that you have in the banking system is also riba. Why? Because when you exchange money for money, this is already prohibited. You cannot exchange money for money in two different amounts. So I give you 10 ringgit and then I get back 11 ringgit. This is not acceptable. Okay. And if it is usury, that means I give you 10 ringgit, I take 20 ringgit. This is usury, exploitative, 100%. But both of them, principle is not whether it is 10% or 100%. The principle is that I am exchanging two amounts of money in different quantities. So I would prefer to just use the term riba, okay, and understand riba to mean any increase in or exchange that does not have the same quantity. There can also be a discussion about quality, but let's not get into that. This would be another lecture by itself. And then Razina is talking about indebtedness. Yeah. So debt, in Islamic banking finance, the standard contracts that we use by many banks are what we call debt contracts. Murabaha. In Malaysia, we have Bai' bi Thaman Ajil, and variety of other terms they use in different parts of the world. But they are basically debt contracts. Okay.
Yeah, Prof, we have three questions now online.
Okay. On
Is
chat.
sister or brother Lonnie Henry, if you can.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir.
Oh yeah, okay, sister. Yeah.
Then I will
Go ahead.
continue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for Prof. Aslam. Do you have my voice?
The sound is not clear. Brother Idris.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So thank you very much for this question. My question is, what advice are you going to give someone that is aspiring to become an entrepreneur or entrepreneur? How do you combat this kind of capitalism, whereby you must follow a certain minimum wage payment, which is usually exploited to the lower workers of your company? So how do you fight this trend, whereby as an owner you have to pay your employees some certain minimum wage? Which is
Brother, yeah, we can follow you. Oh.
Hello.
Wait, bro. I think we unmute you. But okay. Brother, we can follow you. The Idris.
Yeah, I was not able to get the question. It's not clear.
Yeah, so
Okay.
about Sister Lonnie again. Can you proceed with the question?
Okay.
Yeah.
Prof. Aslam.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to ask about what the concrete form of Islamic economic, if we talk about financial institution today, because from I see today, Islamic institution is about what we take from West economic system, then we manage it by Islamic value. Is it what we say it Islamic economic, or there is another form of it? Thank you, Prof.
Okay, this is a very usual question. Yeah, whenever you talk about Islamic economics, people will always refer to Islamic banking. In a way, Islamic banking and finance is a kind of manifestation of Islamic economics. Unfortunately, that Islamic banking and finance not necessarily comes and based on Islamic economics. I think I mentioned it last week. And always the issue will be what the banks and financial institutions are doing. Sometimes they do not represent, we talk about Islamic economics, talking about socio-economic justice. And you find that many people are critical. And then the second point is about the replication. Yeah? They replicate everything that the conventional bank is doing, except now they put some Arabic term or some, what they call Sharia compliant, but maybe I would prefer to use the word legally compliant or FIC compliant. I think we must keep in mind, if you want to talk genuinely about Islamic economics, we have to understand a very important criteria that the Islamic view is it gives emphasis on the real economy, not necessarily on the financial system. Okay, so if you really want to put forward a genuine Islamic economics, it must be putting finance and banking in the correct place. And we can discuss this maybe in another session. But the correct place for finance, and I quote John Maynard Keynes, although he's conventional economist, but he made a very wonderful statement. He said, money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Okay, so when you talk about money, you're talking about the financial system or the banking system, but we must treat the banking system like we treat oil in the engine. What is the important thing in the car? The engine. Without the engine, the car is not going to move. So engine is you can say, the essence of the car. But if you only give attention on the oil, yeah, the minyak kelinci that is using, to make the parts move smoothly, then you are forgetting the engine. So what we have in today's economy, or even in Islamic economies, unfortunately, emphasis is on financial system, on banking system, when actually it should be on the engine, right? So if you really want to develop genuine Islamic economics, please don't separate banking and finance from the real economy. It must be there. That is why, for those of you who are able, please join the 12th conference coming from Istanbul. It started yesterday. It is actually going on today until next Saturday. The topic is sustainable development for the real economy. So they are focusing on the real economy. All right. So maybe that answer just to generate some interest among you.
Okay, Prof. We take two quick questions from Brother Idris and Brother Adamu. Can you make it quick, Brother Idris and Adamu? Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah. Brother Adamu first.
Yes, Prof, my question is, you made mention of fair interest rates. Which kind of interest rate do you think is fair? Is it like 5%, 14% that are fair?
Yeah, you see, that is the problem when you want to talk about fair interest rate. People who make distinction between interest and usury, they say that usury is unfair because it is exploitative. It is too high, right? But your market interest rate based on demand and supply, this is fair price. Okay, so in conventional economics, market interest rate is the fair price. However, from Islamic point of view, any price above the capital sum is riba. Why? Because money for money. And you can only exchange the same money for money. So if I give you a loan, so now terminology, if I say the bank is giving a loan of 100 ringgit, I can only take 100 ringgit back. It has to be Fardul Hasan. Right? That is why in terminology, we never use the term loan given by Islamic banks. They will always say financing.
Yes.
Right? So no rate of interest is considered, well, I don't know how to use the word fair or not, because in conventional economics, market rate is fair. If the market is free and it is depending on supply and demand only without manipulation, the price is the fair right. But in Islam, there is no price for money. There is no extra charge for money.
And
Idris,
again,
yes, let's try again.
and again, in our Islamic banks here in Nigeria,
Yeah.
there is what we call cash reserve ratio to the Central Bank of Nigeria, where each of the amounts the central bank is giving each of the banks that place their money some form of interest rate in one way or the other.
Yeah.
So are they full-fledged Islamic bank? If they are, they will not be collecting such amount of money from the central bank based on their placement of cash. Because I can't reconcile, where are they putting that money in if they are not reinjecting the money?
Okay, but I think that's the question is too big. Yes.
You're referring to a statutory reserve requirement where the money may go into a central bank and they sometimes earn interest on it. Whatever it is, it's not, if you get a return on just putting money and the return is more than what you put, theoretically, this would be riba according to majority of scholars.
Okay, but Idris, the last one.
Assalamu alaikum once again. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
much
sure.
better, yes. Okay.
My question is, how do we combat this trend of capitalist way of wage system in which it's usually exploitive in nature to the employee? For example, you'll find a multi-million-dollar company that still pays the minimum wage that the government set, which is usually not enough to allow people to grow economically, personally, unless they are working for that company.
Okay, this is a very important question. I think it is a problem in many Muslim countries where you have a major problem of wage that is received is not fair. I use the word fair again. Yeah? And this capitalist system is actually well known for exploitation of labor. Simple example, there are many countries, productivity of labor may be 10%, but wages are only increasing by 6%. Okay, so the productivity of the worker is not being rewarded, and that's because of the system that you have. Now, when we talk about minimum wage, one of the problems of capitalist system is that they are still talking about productivity. Even to get the minimum wage, they are talking about productivity, right? And this is a false basis. When we talk about minimum wage, we are not talking about productivity. Minimum wage should be a wage which enables somebody to afford the basic needs in a basket of goods so that he can live like a human being. That should be the basis of minimum wage, not productivity. So sometimes when in countries, people talk about increasing the minimum wage, employers will complain. How can we increase the minimum wage? Because our costs will go up. And if our costs go up, our competitiveness goes down. This is the capitalist way of thinking, right? Our discussion of minimum wage must be based on the fact that the worker is a human being. And therefore, we must calculate what is the cost of his minimum basket of goods. That should be the minimum wage that we pay. Now, the problem in many countries that you don't have sometimes enough money in the company or in the country to allow for that minimum wage. Now, this is another issue. We have a bigger problem in many countries that the minimum wage is very low. All right. So how do you increase? I think the solution has to be much more complex. We do have in our Islamic system institutions like zakat, institutions like waqaf. We need to relook at this. Okay, that's our Islamic institution. But I would also like to propose we can also have in economics a new way of the company making decision. Just now we were just talking about it. In modern economics, companies make decision based on cost benefit. All right, and the company is making decision basically on maximizing their own profit. What we need to do in Islamic economics is to change this model. So the company now is not only thinking about its own profit or the profit of the shareholders, but the company must also put in their profit function of profit for me, but I also think about the workers in my company. So there has to be a different model that we promote, a new model of the firm or theory of the firm, where my goal is not only my personal gain, but also the gain of others. My well-being depends also on the well-being of other people. This model is not new. Even in conventional economics, they talk about it. For those of you who are economists, read up interdependent utility function. My utility depends on your utility. So I cannot only think about myself. I have to think about other people also. So in conventional economics, they have done some work in this area. I believe we can use this in an Islamic framework.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. So maybe it's not hard for you to summarize in 3 minutes and all the big concept we've been talking about for today.
Okay, let me try. Firstly, apologies. I will try to get to these questions in the chat room and try to answer as many as I can. What did we do today? Today we have tried to show that the worldview at the base of Islamic economics is not the same as modern neoclassical economics, which is what we teach in class. And therefore, there is a basis for us to talk about Islamic economics. Our challenge is, how do we build our models and theories from this foundation? Yeah? Modern economics has already done 200 years of developing their models and theories based on their view of man, based on their view of resources, based on their goal of maximizing individual profit. Our challenge is, how do we develop Islamic economics based on our foundation? And this is a challenge for us. We may need to change the model, we may need to change assumption, we may need to change the tools in order to develop Islamic economics. So maybe in the next session, we will talk about what is Islamic economics, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam.
Allah, inshallah. Thank you so much, Prof. We'll see you again next week, same day and same time, inshallah. So tomorrow we have another session at 5 and 9. We'll see everyone again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam alaikum.